in the newsroom. Our story this Wednesday starts with the first public appearance of the surviving Boston Marathon bombing suspect. One of the inevitable questions, whether or not 19-year-old Dzhokhar Tsarnaev and his late brother could have been stopped. But just as we know there's a before September 11th and an after September 11th, there may now be a before Edward Snowden and an after Edward Snowden. The U.S. intelligence whistleblowers' revelations about the outsourcing of spying to the private sector in points around the globe, triggering a flood of follow-up stories about data gathering and secret courts that may or may not violate your personal right to privacy. While the intelligence community insists this is all nothing new, that the likes of France and Germany do it as well, the Obama administration is still in an awkward place. So are Europeans, by the way, such as Germany's chancellor, who's running for re-election in a country that remembers the notorious Stasi, and Edward Snowden declaring that, of course, the Americans are in bed with the Germans. This is forcing her to react just as free trade talks between Brussels and Washington are getting underway. That matters in a world where more and more of that trade happens in cyberspace. Today, in the France 24 debate, we're looking at the world according to Snowden. And with us to talk about it from New York, attorney Chase Madar, author of The Passion of Bradley Manning's The Story Behind the WikiLeaks Whistleblower. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
We want to thank Ellen WASYLINA, who is the chair of the Experts Council, a geopolitics consulting firm, also a member of Republicans Abroad. Thank you for being with us.
You're welcome.
Thanks as well to Martin MICHELOT of the German Marshall Fund think tank. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
And we're happy to see him in the studio. Usually he's in Berlin. Markus KERBER, who teaches political economy at Technische Universität in Berlin. The France 24 debate, where you can always join the conversation on Facebook and on Twitter, our hashtag F24debate. Now, for every Boston bombing, and I guess I'll put this question to Chase Madar, for every Boston bombing, how many of these attacks have been foiled thanks to better intelligence gathering since 2001?
Well, we really don't know. And we've heard all kinds of answers, all kinds of numbers, both from the people leading these security divisions of the executive branch and from the congressional oversight committees, too. The numbers of foiled attacks have fluctuated wildly, very much like the fluctuating numbers of known communists in the U.S. State Department that Joseph McCarthy used to dish out when it suited him. I will say this, it doesn't make sense if you're looking for a needle in the haystack to keep shoveling hay into that haystack. You want that haystack to be as small and selected as possible. And we have every reason to be skeptical of the outsized claims by people like Keith Alexander of the NSA that the NSA surveillance has been helpful in any way.
Your reaction, Ellen WASYLINA, are we putting too much blind faith in the statements of elected officials who say, no, we're doing this right, you just can't see because it's classified?
There's been a long history, of course, as you probably know, François, in the United States of intelligence findings, apparatus. The first one was started under, one of the first one was started under President Carter after Watergate. Okay, and this was well known. They were in an AT&T building, in San Francisco, for example, and that was, an ongoing. And then all these different programs that came around that, in the 80s and the 90s. I don't know why we're so surprised that this is going on. And as you probably know as well, François, is that intelligence gathering, of course, is part of foreign policy that is decided and approved by the president.
But what's different this time is that Edward Snowden doesn't work for the U.S. government. He works for the private sector. And this is outsourced to a guy in Hong Kong.
Outsourced to a guy in Hong Kong.
He's working in an office in Hong Kong.
No, he was based in Hawaii, working under a U.S. contractor who was contracted by the U.S. government. There are more than, and the numbers vary, of course, we're not really sure, in what part of these numbers there are, if there are more than they say up to 1 million people working in some of this intelligence, and of course the budgets are enormous. It's $26 billion.
So you agree with Chase Madar that the math is fuzzy on who's watching what and how?
And how many agencies are involved. They say there's 16 agencies, and then we're talking about military intelligence as well, which is supposed to be, has been estimated to be about $21 billion.
Does that scare you that it's a private contractor?
The NSA or the government agencies always have had private contractors, and you probably know as well, I think I've said this before, does it scare me, just let me finish, saying that there's, many contractors that have secret clearance, okay? So you have to know who has access to what information. And does it scare me? You have to, at one time, entrust yourself in somebody, and this somebody happens to be the government who is ensuring the national security of the United States.
Martin Michelot?
I don't find this scary at all. The Pentagon, Department of Defense, Department of State have a long history of giving contracts to outside firms that put on critical missions in Iraq and Afghanistan. Some of them are very trustful, some of them have created problems, but at the end of the day, I think that the U.S. Department of Defense should clearly find the chain of responsibilities that have allowed Edward Snowden to come out of Hawaii and see why he has been able to out all this critical information. And there may at some point need to be some kind of review that needs to be done of a tighter control of information within the Department of Defense.
Chase Madar?
Well, just to give some perspective to this discussion, there are 1.4 million Americans with top secret security clearance. That's greater than the population of Washington, D.C. That's greater than the population of several of our smaller states all put together. This forces the question, how secret is this anyway? I mean, the fact that 400,000 of these people with top secret so-called security clearance are private contractors, to me, is somewhat immaterial. I think what we face is this ridiculous volume of overclassification. At last count, Washington classified 92 million documents in a single year. And this pretense that 1.4 million people can be, top secret status is just on its face ridiculous. What we really need to do is face reality. About 99% of what gets classified has no business being classified, and then put real effective security measures around that tiny amount that really does have business being secret.
Markus KERBER, since this whole Edward Snowden story broke, has your view on intelligence and the way it's gathered changed?
Surprisingly enough, it has not changed, because we only see the top of an iceberg, and what we see as a common practice is not something which is astounding for somebody who is traditionally dealing with issues of that kind. What is astounding are the following points. First, that America, a great democracy, praising and advocating rightly individual freedom, doesn't have a debate on these issues, and that there seems to be a consensus omnium in America, Republicans and Democrats, that these practices should go on, that they should not even be put into a problematical light. I think it's time to change that. Secondly, that the most important ally on the European continent, Germany, does not raise her head and say, enough is enough, and convokes or convokes the ambassador, but invites the ambassador for a chat in the Foreign Office, because Mr. Murphy, a former executive of Goldman Sachs, who is apparently not aware of these practices, is just on the point of leaving Germany after a very successful ambassadorship. Apparently Germany doesn't have the spinal column, the moral spinal column, to stand up and to say, we are a sovereign country. We cannot accept this. On the contrary, the Minister of Interior Affairs goes to Washington to explain the German point of view and to ask questions. And the German Chancellor, irrespective of which political color she is or he is, says, well, these practices leave a few questions to be answered. This is incompatible with the postulate of sovereignty. It is incompatible with the dignity of a traditional, important European democracy. And I hope that my compatriots will stand up and fight to bring these practices to an end. I'm not astounded that these practices continue, have continued, because the Americans, and we like them very much, anti-Americanism is a pathology, it's not my cup of tea, have treated Germany as some sort of, as their orchard. But we are not Latin America, we are Germany. We are a loyal partner, and we deserve another treatment, and hopefully the political class in Germany will have the guts to say enough is enough, and to summon the American political class, and in particular President Obama, to say you've gone too far.
All right, and let me turn to the Frenchman in the room here. Martin, the French president said, why doesn't the EU suspend those free trade talks? The Germans nixed that idea, and they went ahead with the trade talks that started Monday as scheduled, the free trade talks between the EU and the US. And he refused Edward Snowden asylum. Should he have given him asylum?
No, I think Edward Snowden should not even have asked France for political asylum, because that put France in a difficult position, and therefore forced France to face its demons. But I think it's
why not?
Because France has no interest in harboring someone that the U.S. wants back. U.S. and France have a very strong relationship, and I think that it's interesting that you mentioned, the new postures of sovereignty, because sovereignty the definition of sovereignty is changing right now with the cyberspace. There is very strong cooperation between France, the United States, also between Germany and the United States on these issues. And of all the bad things that have come out of this debate, we have also tended to forget that there have been positive evolutions in these surveillance issues. But on Snowden, I don't think France should have accepted him, and it's a good thing that they didn't, because that would have sent the wrong message to the United States of America, and that could have really been something that would have been detrimental to the transatlantic relationship as we know it today.
All right, I'm going to get back to that point later when we talk about how Europe is handling all of this. So we got a comment here on Twitter we'll tell you about from Vic. The U.S. cannot even secure its own borders. Now how the hell is spying on normal citizens going to help? They should spend that money and time and effort to stop the illegals with tons of drugs pouring over their borders. That's what Vic thinks. Which brings us to what 29-year-old Edward Snowden said. Remember, not an employee of the U.S. government, but of a private subcontractor.
I don't want to live in a world where everything that I say, everything I do, everyone I talk to, every expression of creativity or love or friendship is recorded, and that's not something I'm willing to support. It's not something I'm willing to build, and it's not something I'm willing to live under.
Ellen WASYLINA, did he do the right thing?
Did he do the right thing?
He says, I didn't want to live in a world where everything's recorded, and he went public. Did he do the right thing?
I'd like to go, just to answer your question, I'd like to go back to what my colleagues were saying here on the set. I think there's been a lag, too, in legal issues concerning cyberspace and the way our society has evolved, meaning that the way we live in an open society, everything is on the internet. I think there's been a lag in the legal aspect, and I'm sure our colleague across the ocean will confirm this for us. Is it keeping up with the modern technologies? For example, if you see the United States, for example, invested in nanotechnologies, media technologies, info technologies, the United States invested an enormous amount of money, and I think there's a lag too, maybe on the other side of this side, on Europe, in investments in that. So maybe we're...
So did Edward Snowden do the right thing in flagging that?
I don't think he...
Dangerous question.
I know.
You get into jail,
yeah.
If ever I protect you.
Oh, good, thank you.
I get you out.
Okay, thank you. No, I don't think he did the right thing. You know why? Because we, civil, outside watching, do not know what exactly he had access to. And this national security is made normally to protect us. Again, as I said, there's the problem with legislation on legislating. I was at the OECD conference in February. We're talking about knowledge-based society. I don't think that we're up legally to dealing with problems of how to treat data, how to treat people that use that data.
And isn't this helping to move that conversation forward?
Of course. And that this came out, I don't think we have maybe the legal instruments or the framework to deal with it. So there's also this void in there, and it came very clearly, how can we regulate it? Who should regulate it? Europeans too have rules, the SIS2, which was opened up in 1999, which is just now in April 2013 going into effect. So I believe there is a void there somewhere.
So the legal system's slow, but he still shouldn't have done it.
No.
We have a tweet here.
One word. Karl Popper once wrote a very important book, The Open Society and Its Enemies. And I think he could deliver today a new version, pointing with his fingers at some Secret Service practices and the practices of changing or interchanging information between secret services, and thus creating a mega state, some sort of super secret services in France, in Germany, in the United States, who all, on behalf of security, collect data and have created or usurped power which is totally illegitimate. And I think it has come to a point where our societies, which are our Western societies, which are based on freedom, individual freedom and privacy, have to put limits to that. And as we see, we have no parliamentary control of the secret services in as much as they collaborate with or cooperate with other foreign powers, not being subject to any rule. May I give you one piece of information which might strike you? The German Secret Service, the BND, was created after the war on the basis of the Nazi organization Gehlen, who was the military organization used in the Second World War, particularly for reconnaissance in the East. They failed, as you know, totally. But they were taken over quickly enough by the US Americans. And laid the foundation stone of the BND. So the ties between the Americans and the Germans are particularly close for historic reasons. That's why they think they can operate in Germany as though Germany is the orchard.
Too in Wiesbaden.
Yes.
On Twitter, we have one viewer who thinks Edward Snowden did do the right thing. Luigi says, I understand the security issues, but I don't see why the National Security Agency needs to have access to your average Joe's iCloud account, for example. We're going to pick up on that point when we come back. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate.